I'll go ahead and get started. And I know some people have let me know they're going to be joining in a couple minutes, but welcome to our town hall. Today's topic focuses a little bit more on meeting Millennial and Gen Z parents where they are. So we're going to be talking about, how to communicate to these families, what do they value, um, preparing a little bit more for Gen Z. I think we're just getting a taste for what it's like to have Gen Z parents in our spaces if we have younger children in our programs. So I wanted to bring this up and kind of help schools with a couple of tools to market to this generation of parents. As always, these town halls are very collaborative. I think they work better when people share their thoughts, ideas, and questions. Um, because you all are the ones that are on the grounds and are communicating with families and are observing things firsthand. So feel free at any point to unmute yourself or you can share in the chat any questions or thoughts. First, I'm just going to share again, our upcoming events start next week. We have a series of in-person events all throughout the West Coast. So if you're based in the West Coast or know of any Montessorians who are based in any of these cities, please let them know that there are free events that they can join. These events are for professional development, they're for networking with other Montessori leaders. We're planning on having hopefully CMA, California Montessori Alliance there, as well as the Oregon Montessori Alliance and the Pacific Northwest Montessori Alliance there to share their resources. So, yeah, help us spread the word. All right, so quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. First is understanding today's Montessori parent demographics. I think it's really important to kind of understand that each demographic is actually quite different, and millennials and Gen Zs actually have a lot of things that are different from one another. They grew up in a very different world, in a very different environment, so they have different traits. It's good to be aware and be able to identify it so that way you can better communicate with these groups. Um, Also, exploring values and communication styles of Millennial and Gen Z. I think we're pretty accustomed to speaking to Millennial parents. I think we're used to it by now because we've had Millennial parents in our community for several years now. But Gen Z, the oldest are 29 years old, so they might have some young children that are now going to Montessori school, and it's going to be the next generation of parents. So it definitely is important to know how to appeal to them, how to speak to them. And then aligning Montessori philosophy with modern parent priorities. I think this is the one I'm the most excited for because I truly do think that this new generation of parents is very much going to be aligned with Montessori values, and I'll share a little bit more why later in the presentation. And then how can we build authentic relationships through trust, transparency, and connection? And I also want to allow time throughout this call for school leaders to share, what are the challenges that you've been observing, or what questions are you finding that parents are asking? Are they pushing back on anything? If they're not enrolling, do they usually share why? Just so that we can better understand how can we appeal to this group of parents. So first, it's important to kind of identify these groups. So millennials, that's anyone born from 1981 to 1995. So the youngest are 30, the oldest are in their 40s, and they currently make up the majority of our Montessori parents. So we've been dealing with millennial parents now for a few years. We're probably familiar with how to speak to them, what kind of things that they value. And then Gen Z is anyone born from 1996 to 2012. So obviously, some of those are not parents yet, but they could be soon. They're headed there. They're the ones that are coming next into the career space and into the family space. Some shared traits between these two generations that I think will help us to understand as we kind of shift from millennial to Gen Z parents is they both desire meaningful education and transparent leadership. I think, despite everything going on in the world, there's a lot of chaos out there. I think a lot of parents can agree that it's important to send children to a good school where they can have a good start in life. I don't think that's something that's going anywhere anytime soon. Um, And also, they expect personalized and responsive communication. So you may be familiar with the term automatic gratification. Sometimes I feel like that term is insinuates negativity or, oh, parents always expect something so quickly. But I think that, this group of young parents, they're just very used to having open communication and being heard. I think that's something that they really value. So it's not always about how quick you respond. We can respond, on in our own time. We can think about what we say to these parents, but I think that they really value being heard. This is something that we're noticing with millennials and with Gen Zs. So I think having that responsive communication, having a personalized approach when possible with parents is going to go a long way with both of these groups. I want to focus first on kind of breaking down the millennials. Like, as I mentioned earlier, this is a group that we're well acquainted with already. Ages 30 to 44, these are the majority of our current parents. Um, some main traits, behaviors, values, they really value purpose and authenticity. Um, They want to align parenting and education with meaningful values and community impact. And I'm sure we've seen this in our communities, especially those that are Montessori parents. I think they're even leading into this a little bit more. And they're also collaborative decision makers. I think that they prefer partnership over hierarchy. They want to feel heard by school leaders. This is why in our town hall last week, we talked a lot about parent involvement. How can we get parents involved in our community more? A big thing that a lot of schools said made a difference was having parents involved in the decision making of the school, whether it's having a parent on the board, whether it's having a parent association, whether it's having them help plan events. This is something that they really value. These are also people that are digitally connected. They use media and online reviews to research and compare schools. Now, we've had town halls in the past about getting feedback from parents, and it's true, they do their research nowadays, and more likely than not, they are checking on third-party websites like Niche, like Great Schools, like Yelp, before they make a decision about your school. So it's important to have a presence there. They value what other parents think. I think all parents to some extent are this way, despite of what generation they belong to. But they're certainly more digitally connected than, our Gen Xers. So they're plugged into social media. They also seek flexibility and work-life balance to some extent. So they appreciate schedules and communication that acknowledge that they're really busy and they have blended lives. So this is kind of one of the first generations, especially in the US, where we're seeing both parents work full-time jobs, and that's very common. So yes, the schedules are busy. And sometimes parents can feel a little bit overwhelmed if the school is asking for too much. If you're having too many parenting events, they're not going to feel like they can come to every one, and then they might feel like a failure. Um, so I think that they're appreciative when you recognize that there is a lot on their plate and you can meet them where they are and be flexible to some extent. I think that is something that goes a long way with this generation. They're also very experience driven. They value experiences over material goods. They're interested in learning events, family activities, and personal growth. This is why I feel that the school events where it's parent and child involved. So I know at a lot of Montessori schools, you might do something like a Festival of Nations or something to celebrate where everyone's heritage is from and everyone can come together. Some schools shared that they might bring a dish from their home country or from their cultural heritage and share together. And that is an experience, that is a memory for the parents, that is a bonding moment. And I think when these working parents are so busy day to day and they, can take maybe a morning off to come to the school and have an experience like that, they walk away feeling that they did something valuable with their time and they created a new memory with their child. And that's something that's really valuable to these families. And they are also feedback oriented. Um, Although I have heard after being on these town halls for over 5 years now that sometimes it's hard to communicate to certain parents and give them certain feedback about their children, especially during observation meetings. Sometimes that might be a little bit difficult, and you really have to be strategic with how you convey messages when this happens. But overall, these people, they really did grow up with participation and feedback culture. There's a lot of misconceptions that, millennials, they always got a participation trophy. That's not the case. These people had a difficult job market to enter into. They succeeded in life. They didn't always have the economy on their side and they persevered. I think that this group of people can be resilient. Um, they do expect regular updates and opportunities to share input as well. They also want to be able to voice how they feel, their thoughts. So I think when a school is running surveys or constantly trying to get feedback from their parent community, it can also be helpful and show that the school really cares and is here to listen to what parents need. Um, Understanding why they are this way is also important because hopefully it can help us to speak and appeal to this group better. This is a group that came of age during rapid technological growth and social change. This was kind of the the coming of the internet. This is a huge, huge chapter in human history that has forever changed everything. So these are people that are used to that. They entered adulthood in economic uncertainty, creating a focus on stability, purpose, and personal fulfillment. As I mentioned, many of these millennial parents, they remember living through the 2008 financial crisis. They've kind of experienced hard times. Um, so that is something that sometimes makes them consider, finances, those types of thinking processes. So they do value that, tuition might be a challenge that you have to convey. You really have to lean into the value of Montessori a lot. And they also grew up in an era that emphasized collaboration and self-expression. So again, this was the introduction of social media, trends. Things change rapidly and people can find their subcultures. So they value this as well. Gen Z is a little bit different. They have similarities. Um, and of course, up here it says 13 to 29. So some of these people are not yet parents, but this is a group we need to be prepared to understand better um, for the future of our schools. And this is actually a group that I'm quite excited about because I see a lot of potential for them to love Montessori. Um, I think there's a lot of fear about Gen Z. There's always criticism about Gen Z. But I think that, when I look at it through a Montessori scope, there's so many things that I'm like, yep, this would be the perfect Montessori parent. So first, they are digitally native. They have really never known a life without the internet. Yes, sure, maybe the older Gen Z had one family computer when they were growing up, as opposed to everyone having an iPad and an iPhone. But still, throughout their whole life, they knew what the internet was. Um, they crave authenticity and transparency. I think these people, they've been fed ads from day one on a digital platform. So they really detect quite easily inauthentic messaging. They really value honesty and they value human tone. And I think this is where it's going to be really good for us because in Montessori, we're not really salesy people. We don't like to use salesy language. We like to use science. We like to use success stories. We like to share why we love Montessori. And I think that's really going to resonate with this generation. They're also very socially conscious. This is another place where I feel Montessori is really going to take center stage with Gen Z parents. They really prioritize inclusivity, sustainability, and ethical practices. And this was something that Maria Montessori preached. She really wanted children to be the change makers. She thought that the children were the ones who were going to better the world. And this is something that we can really appeal to when it comes to Gen Z parents. They really want that for their children, especially when we're seeing a decline in birth rates because people are nervous about having children. That doesn't mean the desire is not there. We need to inspire parents and let them know that their children are the change makers, and Montessori can help your child become a leader and a confident individual. Also, they are mentally health aware much more than other generations. They're very used to maybe using therapy vocabulary. They prioritize emotional wellness for themselves and their children. So, they want to be present with their children. They might be really busy sometimes, but they really want to when they have the time. They're also visual and interactive learners. They prefer videos, visuals, and interactive content over long text. Sometimes this is where I notice a little bit of a gap because after seeing many Montessori websites while working with Montessori Thrive, sometimes we get really carried away with writing these beautiful long descriptions of our programs and going into the details. And some parents might appreciate that, but mostly they just want to see what the environment looks like um, first. Then when they come in for the tour, you can really tell them the story. But a picture is worth a thousand words, especially to this group of people. A beautiful environment, a video of the classroom is going to be very, very meaningful. Community and collaboration focused as well. I think they seek peer validation and they want to feel like they belong both online and offline. So, um, community events are going to be important in moving forward. I think, can your school offer a place for parents to connect and feel supported? That's definitely a question you're going to be wanting to ask yourself within the next couple of years. And again, why are they this way? Let's kind of explore that a little bit more. So they grew up in the age of smartphones. This group, the oldest ones had smartphones in high school. So they were quite young when they were exposed to having this technology. They're very used to being on social media, and social media opened up the door to global activism. So they really care about political issues, social issues, and they want to feel like they are part of something bigger. Again, this is something that we can appeal to in Montessori. They also value transparency due to growing up amid misinformation and online marketing saturation. They just want authenticity to shine through. And they experienced school and early adulthood through instability again. Some of them experienced a pandemic while they were, just exiting university. There's social movements. There's a driving desire for safety, inclusion, and genuine community. And I think that that's something we'll continue to see over the next few years. Um, I see a comment here from Mickey. What are your thoughts about how either of these generations respond to an obvious use of ChatGPT? Should we work towards removing any telltale signs, or does it not bother them? I think that people can tell to some extent. I don't think that they see it as a negative thing, but what I would say is personally, I wouldn't post or release anything that is 100% ChatGPT produced without editing it and adding a sense of yourself in that messaging first. And that's a really good question because I think ChatGPT and all AI can be a really great tool and it should be utilized because it's great. It saves us time. It draws from a lot of information from the internet. It can come up with really well-written things. But also it does require a little bit of editing. I always think that things need a human touch. And what I can say is that I think this generation is going to be very quick to pick up on when things are AI generated. Is anyone else feeling the same? And again, if you're writing an email newsletter or maybe you got an email that you don't quite know how to respond to, absolutely go to ChatGPT and ask it, what's a good way to respond or can you help me write an empathetic message? I don't think there's anything wrong there. Um, just make sure that it's edited down a little bit or go in and just revise it before sending it would be my advice. Again, just overall values with both of these generations. So I think they both really value purpose and meaning. So this is something that we can appeal to as Montessorians. They want schools that align with their values, diversity, wellness, sustainability. And you know what? Every Montessori is also going to have a very different community. A Montessori in Dallas, Texas is going to have a very different community to a Montessori in Los Angeles, California. Those parents are going to have a completely different set of values. They have a different lifestyle. They have different types of careers. So it's also important to understand your specific, geographical and local community. But overall, they value these things. Community and belonging is another thing. Just as I mentioned earlier, we talked last week about how important it is to just host events that allow parents to build community within our schools, just casual social events can go a really long way. They want to feel a part of something bigger than just a school, especially when it comes to raising your children, because it does take a village. And sometimes, with the way things are in the modern world, everybody's so busy, can feel very isolating. If your school can be that community, it will create a better experience for both the parent and the child. I think it will encourage parents to stay in our communities longer as well. So I recommend finding kind of ways to do that. If anyone wants to share anything else that they've implemented, feel free to drop that in the chat, and we kind of like discuss a couple more ideas. Um, Personal growth is another thing that these parents value. I think parenting is viewed as evolving and a mindful journey. We've seen that a lot of schools, they host parent education classes and workshops, and parents aren't always shying away from it. Of course, some parents don't collaborate as much, but I think that parents want to be there and they want to understand how they can better serve their children. We've seen the rise of parenting coaches in the past couple of years. This is something that parents are realizing it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek a professional to ask how to navigate these situations. Um, and again, transparency, clear communication builds trust and loyalty. I think that's something that families really value in their school, especially those that have younger children. I think it's very crucial to have transparency. And also, strangely, adolescent as well. Adolescent parents sometimes, because that can be a scary time. Not a scary time to be a parent, but that's where things shift a little bit in the house. Um, Communication styles. So again, I mentioned this group of parents, both Millennial and Gen Z, they're really kind of visual people. Those long text is not going to go very far with them. If you can edit down your newsletter to bullet points and important things they need to know, edit it down, add a picture. You don't have to worry about writing very long captions on social media. I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but it's not really. I feel like your time could be better spent elsewhere than, coming up with, and I've seen this happen with schools where they have a beautiful picture that already tells me so much, and then they have three long paragraphs describing the picture on Instagram, and that's just not how the platform works. So, save that time and add that to a blog on your website instead, because a parent is actually more likely to read long media in a blog than they are on social media. So it's understanding how to communicate, where to put things. Mobile-friendly updates are great, short videos, images, stories, SMS messages for anything important. Do not overuse the SMS message though, because if you start messaging SMS, text for everything, they will mute you. So just important things, important dates. If your school is closing because of weather, that's completely normal to send an SMS. Um, and try to edit down communication. So something that works really well for a lot of schools is having like an app or a parent communication form where the parent knows that they can check their daily, so that's still maintaining consistency without feeling like you're knocking on their door constantly, like, hey, look at this, look at this. They know to check the app, and then for important school updates, send them a message. Um, Expect quick two-way communication. Sometimes these parents are going to ask questions right away, or they might go ahead and RSVP to an event. Sometimes you might have to follow up with them a little bit more. Use social media to evaluate schools and communities. So this is something that they're going to check social media. And I always try to explain to schools, they ask me, what's the point of having an Instagram, or I don't have a lot of followers on Instagram. Is it worth it? And I say to those schools, having a social media profile for your school isn't about how many followers you have or how many likes you have on a photo. It's the fact that if a parent is looking into your school, they are looking at your Instagram to get a feel for who you are. They're doing stalking. They're stalking just as they would with anything else. If a Gen Z person is going to a restaurant, they're looking at pictures of the food before they go. Um, that's the way that they work. And so they're looking at pictures of your school before they go. So it's really nice to have an Instagram presence. That parent might not follow you right away. They might not follow you until they join your school, but they are looking at your profile. So if all you have on your social media is a bunch of just generic Canva posts that look very, that they could belong to any school, it doesn't tell your story. And then the parent thinks, oh, this is very inauthentic. I don't really know who this school is. I'm going to keep looking. It's actually better to just have some candid, iPhone photos of what's going on day to day, or the materials in your classroom, or the work that children completed. Those are things that tell your story. So that's an example of how you can use social media, because they are going to be checking your Facebook and they are going to be checking your Instagram. I can almost guarantee you that that is part of their research process. And they also dislike overly formal one-way messaging. So again, keep all of any kind of advertising short and sweet. Um, don't try to do too much text at the beginning. And I always think that any kind of marketing for Montessori schools, it should be showing the most authentic photos as you can. Um, just highlighting the benefits of Montessori and encouraging them to come in, inviting them in a friendly way to come and visit your school. Because when they come into your school, the environment tells a story, and you or whoever works on your admissions team will be able to tell the story much better than a long wall of text, especially to a parent who might not be familiar with Montessori yet. Just some practical tips that you can take away and start using is to use Instagram or short reels to share classroom stories. Reels refer to just videos that you can post on Instagram. They're typically not longer than a minute. These don't have to be professionally edited if you don't have the time or resources. They can just be, a panorama video of your classroom for the day, or a new shelf that you set up for the, primary classroom. What are the themes that you're focusing on this week on our marine biology shelf? And you can kind of just go through that shelf and talk about it and post it. So that's the type of content that parents see and go, huh, I get a feel for what this school is doing. Keep newsletters brief, as I mentioned, with links for more details. Again, learn more here. Parent is interested, they will do that. So the thing that happens is when a parent sees a really, really, really long email, they're going to read the first paragraph and then they're not going to read the rest. So pictures, bullet points, all of that makes a difference. Um, Offer parent text updates or digital newsletters, as I mentioned earlier, and you can always ask parents to opt in or out. This also becomes a lot easier with an app. I don't know if anyone here uses Brightwheel or Transparent Classroom. If you do, you can let us know if that works well for you. Um, Build community through private groups. What I mean by this is maybe you have a Facebook group for parents and you have one of your guides administrate it to make sure that everything being posted is appropriate. But, parents are welcome to post or share um, events, news, information about the school, or ask questions. Any questions so far about what I've covered before I go into expectations? Okay. Um, a couple of expectations of these generations as well is the customer service mindset. They expect prompt replies and empathy. And sometimes, unfortunately, they might see it as, oh, well, I'm paying you. You are, you know, you have to listen to me. They might have that mindset. Not all parents, but perhaps we've experienced something like this. So having vocabulary ready um, for when we experience this, and to very clearly communicate that yes, you're paying tuition to attend the school, but this is a partnership. It goes both ways, and to again actively listen to parents and make them feel heard and remain firm yet kind. I think this is something we do well as Montessorians, but I think that really helps to have a couple of things in the bank ready to pull out when parents are like that, because they do sometimes expect a customer service mindset. This is something that you might also have to meet with your staff about because oftentimes guides are so well with children. They work so well with children and they love being with the children. And sometimes the challenges are more with the parents and how they can communicate with parents. I'm not sure if some schools are observing the same thing, but it happens in a lot of communities. So it's good to make them feel empowered and give them some responses that they can give when they're facing these situations. They also value transparency, as I mentioned earlier, but they really want to know the why behind policies. You might be getting a lot of those questions. Why is it this way? You know, luckily, I think Montessori is pretty good at explaining things. So, a policy that we had at my Montessori school is because we wanted, especially for the young children, we had toddler and primary programs. We did not allow children to wear, um, we didn't have uniforms at our school. We didn't allow them to wear clothing that had cartoon images, like Disney princesses, or because we felt that was distracting. And that also does not really apply to Montessori philosophy, where we're really focused on the reality and the beginning of, at least in those first 6 years. And a lot of parents would ask why. And it's good to have that information readily available, have a form, maybe in your parent handbook. When you say why something is not allowed, you really explain and break down in a gentle and firm way. This is why we have this policy. And then you'll find that parents are usually more receptive and understanding of why that is. Um, Collaboration, seek partnership, not hierarchy. Again, this is the best way to set the tone for everything. It's also the best way to avoid negative interactions with that customer service mindset that this generation has, is if you just set that expectation early on that this is a partnership. We've talked at past town halls about signing partnership agreements with parents so that they understand that it's a give and take with every school and parent. Value alignment is another thing. I think parents need to see integrity and care reflected in leadership. So, just as children, they see what is modeled to them, I think that parents do as well. So, it's always good to have a consistent presence throughout the Montessori school, be there, kind of get to know as many parents as you can. I think that goes a long way. A couple of practical tips to kind of meet these expectations. I think offering a virtual Ask Me Anything session, or maybe just have an accessible way for families to contact you. Maybe you have a box that parents can put suggestions in anonymously. The more approachable you are, and the more kind of you show that you're open to hearing them, I think that goes a long way with these parents. Share decision making, reasoning openly and clearly. Again, explain things, the why behind things, that goes a long way. And it also just helps to avoid any challenges in the future or any disagreements in the future, especially when you have it in writing. I think parent handbooks, think very strategically about what you're putting in parent handbooks. Definitely explain the why behind things. In writing, you can always reference and go back to that. And model humility and approachability. This is something I think we do rather well in Montessori schools, but show family empathies. I think um, parenting is hard, especially in this generation. I think parents feel more isolated than ever. They feel more burnt out than ever. If you really hear what Gen Z and millennial parents are going through is a lot of economic uncertainty, um, a lot of political uncertainty, a lot of things that might give them anxiety about raising a child. So I think they require a little bit of just seeing that we hear them. That is important. How can we align Montessori with modern values? I know for those of you that just joined, I said that at the beginning of this presentation, I'm really excited about Gen Z parents that are just now entering the scene, the oldest being 29, because I feel that they're really going to be well aligned with Montessori. Um, a couple of things and language that we can maybe use to appeal to this group of parents. So, at our core, we are all about independence, respect, peace, and curiosity. And I think this really aligns with Millennial and Gen Z especially. Um, some modern parent values, emotional intelligence is huge. I think parents really want to connect with their children. They want to break generational traumas. They don't want to yell at their children. They're open to gentle parenting. Um, I prefer positive discipline, but gentle parenting is a term that's become really popular. Social awareness and creativity. So these are all things we can appeal to. So we use the terminology grace and courtesy. To them, it might be social emotional learning. This is something that a lot of parents are becoming attuned to. So maybe when you're explaining grace and courtesy to these parents, you can say, "Oh, it's teaching them social emotional learning from early on." And this is why, we want children to have good manners. We want to make them good citizens of the world, and you can dive into it that way, and it will really resonate. Um, we use the term work periods or work cycles to a parent. We can explain that that is all about independent, focused learning. Practical life skills, and confidence building. That's what it translates to essentially, because a lot of parents, they might come into the classroom, especially Gen Z parents that are not familiar with Montessori yet. They see a child sweeping or cleaning and they don't understand it. They don't understand how that connects to, eventually learning math or learning um, history or learning other things or just communication skills or language. Um, and you can explain its skills, its confidence building, its patience. All those things are required for all types of learning later on in life. So I feel that Montessori already embodies what modern parents value. We just need to communicate it in a language that they immediately understand. Show how Montessori prepares children for real life, not just academics. I think this is going to really resonate with families. We can really lean into it. A lot of Gen Z, they are revolutionary. They are changing the world. And I think they want their children to change the world too. They're hopeful. I think that the Gen Z people that are having children are hopeful that we can build a better world for them. So we can lean into that. Building trust and connection. This was something I mentioned was important earlier, but they really do prioritize authentic relationships over polished marketing. So the friendlier you are, the more approachable you are, the better. There are misconceptions out there about Montessori being um, elitist. That's a reality that sometimes we have to tell parents, no, actually, Maria Montessori started with the children that were in the slums of Rome, and she believed every child should have access to this and an environment and respect and a child-led environment. So, um, telling the stories, I think, is the way to authenticity. Provide regular touch points, newsletters, parent cafes, workshop, as I mentioned, anything where you can tell your stories, you can connect with parents, you can build community, and respond quickly to feedback and express gratitude. So, um, always, even those difficult parents that come into the school a lot and maybe they micromanage a little bit or they're anxious or really they're worried or maybe they feel guilt of some sort because their child might have difficult goodbyes in the morning and that might make them worry a little bit more. This is just where we need to offer reassurance and we need to show, wow, we see that you really care. And that's the type of parent that we want in our community, even if sometimes they can be a bit much. If we just listen to them and hear them out, I think eventually we can build stronger relationships with them. Ideas to try. You can feature a monthly parent voice in a newsletter. Maybe you can cycle this. If you this is works really well if you have a smaller school where maybe once a week or once a month a parent can share a success story about Montessori or an experience that they had at your school, whether it was something they observed in their child. Um, that's always something fun to include, just so that everyone feels that they have a voice and they're being featured in the community. Open classroom observation or virtual tours. Many Montessori schools already have observations. At my school, we had them twice a year. And this was crucial. I think this is really what made parents go, okay, wow, I see the value here. So that's really important. And virtual tours or in-person tours are crucial to the way that we operate. It's essential for enrollment. Parents need to see firsthand what it's like for students to be in the Montessori classroom. And then just what we're showing in our newsletters or on social media is short behind the scenes videos. A lot of parents don't understand maybe what their child does day to day in Montessori. Some do, and some don't. Sometimes a child might come home that day and all they did was polish silver, eat their snack, and maybe, did a collage when they're really little and they're maybe only in for half days. And a parent doesn't really get it. Or they're like, oh, I'm investing in this education and I don't understand why they're doing this. That my child is telling me that they spent their day silver polishing. And so sometimes those behind the scene videos or a breakdown as to why we do these things is really valuable because as soon as they hear the why, it it really resonates so much more. So again, parents of today, they expect an ongoing dialogue, simple gestures like consistent check-ins, quick thank yous. Those make a huge difference in trust and loyalty. All right, let's pause for a little bit of discussion. I'd love to know, have you made any changes to events or communication for new parents in your community? Do you think that there's going to be a shift in how you share things? What questions have you heard most from parents recently? I'd love to know, like when you're giving tours, what are the most frequently asked questions, or what are the concerns that parents have about Montessori? Like, what are their, oh, but I'm not sure about this. Or, I don't know how I feel about that because that's not what I'm used to or I've heard elsewhere. I'd love to know what are we hearing? So I'll pause and let everyone share a little bit. Typically, I hear about safety and security during tours. Absolutely. I think security is a big thing. There's a lot of incidents at schools, especially in the US. So parents are concerned. So that's something that we can appeal to. Absolutely. Is anyone else experiencing this? I feel like, especially if you have young children, having security cameras, things like that.
Well, one of our parents, actually, the new ones, basically the question she posed was, are you going to have bulletproof windows and doors throughout the school? Based on, the concern they had about safety and security.
Absolutely. It's a very valid concern as well. Um,
Yeah, we do get questions about safety. But also some of the other questions we get about Montessori are if children are in a mixed age group, how do teachers know how to give lessons to a particular student, or are they covering, is the third grader learning the same thing as the first grader? Or
mhm.
are the kindergartners, and they'll usually say, are the kindergartners with the babies all the time? And we say, oh, we have no babies at school. And we have 3 year olds and they are working and they're not babies. So we have to educate the visitors on how the 3 year cycle works and that we actually have a curriculum in the school that the students follow.
The concern there that parents might have is, is my child going to fall behind academically because there's not enough rigorous, lessons being given to them or they're being taught the same things. But yeah, that's where parent education and the why is very crucial. Um, and we hear that a lot. It's challenging to tell a parent that is used to traditional school, oh, your 6-year-old is going to be in the same space as a 3-year-old. At first, they're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to share about a change that we made to our communications for new families. Something we did was, in addition to having a welcome breakfast for new families, we added a gift box, which has like a sticker of our core values and some swag. Like we added a deck of playing cards with our logo on it. Um, we gave them a bottle opener that has our logo and it sticks to their refrigerator so they can see it every day. and then a picture frame with their child's picture in it, with the logo of our school on the picture frame, so that it's displayed in their homes and people can, say, oh, what is this TEC schools? And then it becomes a point of conversation. And that it feels wonderful for parents to receive that. It costs us about $10 or less per box, uh, and it makes a difference.
Thank you, Rupali. That's a good idea. Um, Here in the chat, Vicky also shared, we're trying to vary our parent talks, some after drop off, some virtual after bedtime, some after school. No timer method is great for everyone, though. We are hearing more and more requests for recording our parent talks to share with the community afterwards. Yes, and I can tell you because we plan our own parent ed events, and the live attendance is usually very low in comparison to how many people watch the recording. So I feel you. I think it's very difficult to find times that work for parents. I would say a solution that might work really well and something that we've talked about, it's been a while since we brought this up at a town hall, um, is the shift to creating a podcast, perhaps. Sometimes parents they feel burnt out, and when they have a free moment, they might not necessarily always want to spend it in learning mode or in you know, maybe they want to read a book or watch a TV show with their partner. And that's the reality because they are overworked. They're working 8, 9 hours a day. They're then picking up the kids from school, and then they're doing this and they're doing that. They're doing dinner, they're doing baths. So it can be tricky. So with a podcast or with a recording, what happens is while a mom is doing her grocery run, she might put her headphones in and listen, or while she's driving to school to pick up the children, she might, plug in and listen about positive discipline. So that could be a solution that you can maybe offer, and you can select the very, very crucial topics for them to be, not recorded. That's required because we want you to ask questions and we want those to be live and we want collaboration. But for the topics that you feel like are valuable for parents to just be able to listen to, that could be a tool. And plus, Gen Z and Millennial are very used to listening to podcasts. So it's another way of kind of meeting them where they are. It's very easy to produce as well. All you need is a voice recording app. There's ones that are like $1 on the App Store, or something that you can convert to an MP4 file, which any voice recording would do, and maybe a an expensive mic. They're $15 to $20 on Amazon, just so that the sound quality is good. That doesn't have to be any kind of editing involved. You can just talk for an hour or 45 minutes about the topic. Um, I have a couple more things here. Oh, I have another question here. Wally, most millennial parents are two people working families. They are torn between their desire to offer more meaningful education for their children and the need to deal with outside demands on their time. Often, they give into the latter and just put their children to a daycare so that they don't have to be involved with the care of their children while they tend to their own demands. How can a school deal with these divergent demands in their lives? I think ultimately, if a parent truly values, um, what's easiest for them, they're probably not the right parents for your community. I think the only way to combat this is to educate parents as much as possible about the importance of their child's education. The parents that understand, those are usually the ones that stay. But ultimately, a parent that values, simplicity of their schedule and their time, it's really, really, really tough. Um, I don't know if anyone else has any advice for this. I think this is a really difficult one because ultimately, I don't think there's a single school out there that hasn't lost at least one parent due to, it's just works better for my schedule, or I need the after school care. think the way to combat this is parent education, showing them that they need this. Their child needs this. Their child is thriving in this environment. If you're taking them to the daycare, you're putting them in an adult-led environment that they are not going to be thriving in. They're not going to be having their developmental needs met. And a parent that truly wants the best for their child is willing to take on the inconvenience.
I think one of the things that you can do in that regard is really focus on educating the parents about how human development happens in those first 5 years, or whatever age group you want to focus on, because most of them really are not thinking of anything before kindergarten as being learning based. It doesn't matter where I put my baby, right? And the more we talk about the science of human development and how Montessori is based on that, not on just education. I mean, any place could educate your child, but not any place isn't thinking about what's happening in here and what's happening here, and how important movement is in optimizing their child's brain for the future. If the story they hear is birth to 6 determines whether your child is going to be the next, I don't know, pick your favorite hero, whether it's Bezos or somebody else. Your child has the opportunity to be the next something. If you invest now in optimizing the ability of their brain to think outside the box, absolutely learn at the maximum capacity, develop their brain in a way that nothing else does. We do something that no one else does. And that is, we look at how the brain develops and we speak to that all day, every day, from the time they enter our classrooms at 2 or 3 months until they leave our classrooms, whatever that is. We are thinking about how the human being is developing. And that's a story nobody else can tell. And I think that speaks to the younger crowd in particular, because they don't have parents who are nurturing them in what it's like to raise a child, because they think they want to raise their children differently. Right? They look back at their own parenting and they may or may not like it, but they think, well, we parent differently today. Whether it's gentle parenting, positive discipline, whatever you want to call it, we parent differently. We think of parenting differently. And so they don't go to their parents and ask, what's the best thing? How do you think children develop? Or what did you find worked for you? They don't even ask those questions. They go to the internet or they go to a friend, and they don't always get, do you know what? The human being is developing in a certain way during those first years, in a way that is so different than anybody really thought. And now we know it, and let's take advantage of it, because once it's over, it's over. That's my high horse.
No, I love that. It's to anyone here, Donna last week gave a really, really good parent ed talk that really focused on that, kind of the science and the human development roots of Montessori. I'm gonna share the link here if you are interested in watching the recording, because it focuses on a lot of that. And I had a conversation with Donna earlier this week where she mentioned a lot of parents, they worry a lot about where their child is going to go to college. They're like, oh, that's what's important, is like what college they get into, because that's going to determine the rest of their life. Really, if you think about it, how many people work in what they majored in? How many, how many people were successful despite not going to college? Or how many people went to college and then didn't even end up pursuing a career in that? The first 6 years of life it's undeniable, their importance and significance to the rest of your development and even your adult life. Um, so we have that argument on our side. It's just getting them to understand it. And if you convey that message effectively and parents still choose to go to daycare, there's nothing that you can do. That parent is lost, and it is what it is. They made the decision to do that, and they kind of have to live with that. And unfortunately, um, their child is the one that is going to lose so many benefits from being in an environment with, a prepared adult who understands their needs. But I think it's really just communicating the value. So yeah, I recommend it because Donna put it really beautifully in her talk last week. The full recording is there, so if you're looking for inspiration for how to convey that message to parents, I highly recommend checking it out. I guess just a couple of other digital engagement tips. Please make sure your website is optimized for mobile. Um, I look at school websites every day, and I don't think people understand how important it is um, to have an impressive website, especially with Gen Z parents. If they see an old WordPress style website that hasn't been updated since 2010, they will think that it's unprofessional, and they will think that I don't understand why the school hasn't upgraded or done their website. I don't really think that's a trustworthy brand. It should be easy to navigate on a phone. More than half, 70% of parents are looking at your website through a phone. So please, please, please make sure that it works and looks really nice. And try to avoid stock images because Gen Z can identify this from a mile away, millennials as well. If you're using any type of stock imagery, make sure it's Montessori authentic. Our recommendation is for your website on the home page, it should be your school, your students, your classrooms, everywhere else you can maybe weave in stock imagery that is Montessori authentic. But that makes a huge difference because parents can sense the inauthenticity right away. Highlight parent testimonials and alumni success stories. And again, just ask for feedback throughout the year. I would say twice a year at least, maybe at the end of each semester or each term. Please ask parents for feedback. It shows that you are actively listening to what they want to see in the school. Just as Vicki said, she's getting feedback about what's working with parent education classes and sessions. Just a couple quick engagement ideas. You can create, day in our classroom videos, as I mentioned earlier, behind the scene videos, offer downloadable Montessori at home guides, free ebooks on your website, and share family success stories as well via social media. You can do the family feature as well. Just some key takeaways before we wrap up. Millennial and Gen Z parents, they seek authentic connection and purpose. I feel that Montessori aligns with them. They prioritize responsive, transparent, and human connection, and they build relationships through shared values. So one thing you can hopefully do to think about after this call is identify one communication or community practice you can modernize for this month. Final questions. If anything resonated with you today, what challenges are you facing with engaging with Millennial or Gen Z parents, and how can we make Montessori's message more approachable to new families? If you have any thoughts on that before we wrap up, I'll pause. I feel hopeful. I hope everyone can feel hopeful that I think this new generation of parents, they want something different. They they want something untraditional. And Montessori it's been around for a long time, but it's not traditional. So I think we are the answer that a lot of parents are looking for, and we can really lean into our stories and what Montessori really is. And I think a lot of Gen Z and millennial parents are going to be excited about it. Again, if you want to see any future town hall topics, please email me or reach out to me about what you'd like to see in the future. We always plan these around what you all want to discuss. I'll drop my email here in the chat. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Just a reminder that next week we are not having a town hall because we'll actually be on tour in the West Coast that Thursday, we're hosting an in-person event in Los Angeles, hopefully connecting with Montessorians there. So we'll be back at our regular time on October 23rd. So we'll see you then. All right, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Take care.